Glory to Jesus Christ, glory to him forever. So I did a short video recently talking about how I think that most mainstream Christian films are objectively awful from a theological and storytelling standpoint. And this is nothing new. Even many Christians know that these movies are terrible. And these movies, they just force a message. They don't tell a coherent storyline. They don't tell a realistic storyline. They're diving into stereotypes. It's just ridiculous. And I wanted to go into some more detail about this, so I actually have a script. I rarely have a script for videos, but I have one for this one. So it's, why are Christian movies so bad? It's a fair and frequently asked question. Many people, even within Christian circles, critique the quality of Christian films. The reasons are a mix of cultural, artistic, and market dynamics. One, message over art. Many Christian movies prioritize delivering a moral or theological message over telling a nuanced story. This can lead to heavy-handed dialogue, predictable plots, and flat characters where the message becomes more important than the medium. 2, low budgets. Most Christian films are independent productions with limited funding. That often means cheaper special effects, less experienced actors, and lower quality direction or editing. Now I'm going to break script for a minute to talk about this. The ones that annoy me even more than this are the ones that actually have a very high budget, but they're only putting a little bit of that budget into the movie. So even though they have a lot of money they could be spending on this movie, they're spending very little, and it shows. And it makes me wonder where the rest of the money is going, because the movie becomes a waste of time. 3, echo chamber storytelling. These films are often made by and for a very specific audience, which can lead to overly safe or simplistic storytelling. The result is a narrative that preaches to the choir and avoids exploring complex, ambiguous, or darker human themes that great films often tackle. 4, limited creative freedom. Filmmakers in this genre sometimes feel constrained by religious expectations. They may avoid certain topics, language, or moral ambiguity to avoid offending their core audience. This can stifle authenticity or emotional depth. 5, underdeveloped talent pipeline. Hollywood has a long tradition and ecosystem for nurturing top-tier talent. Christian cinema, being more niche, often lacks this infrastructure, so up-and-coming writers, directors, and actors might not see it as a career-making space. That said, not all Christian films are bad. Some, like The Chosen, Silence, or A Hidden Life, have received critical praise and avoid the pitfalls mentioned above. They tend to do better when they focus on good storytelling first and let the message emerge naturally. So, how do these problems relate to the problems that we see in evangelical charismatic Protestantism? This gets to the cultural core of why many Christian films, particularly those tied to evangelical charismatic Protestantism, fall into the pitfalls we discussed earlier. Here's how that specific context shapes the issues. 1, message-driven media. Evangelical and charismatic circles often emphasize evangelism as the primary purpose of art. The goal becomes saving souls or spreading the gospel, so storytelling often takes a backseat to didactic messaging, resulting in on-the-nose conversion scenes, simplistic morality such as good versus evil with no gray areas, and miraculous resolutions that feel emotionally unearned. This leads to films that feel more like sermons than stories. And we've seen this a lot. We've seen a lot of these films that feels like you're just watching a sermon, but it's not even a good sermon, it's a forced one. 2, suspicion of secular art. Many in this tradition view mainstream media and Hollywood as morally compromised. That can create a bubble where Christian creatives are cut off from broader artistic influences or discouraged from engaging with complex worldly themes like doubt, suffering, or ambiguity, essential ingredients in great drama. 3, spiritual experiences over narrative coherence. In charismatic circles, emotional and spiritual experiences, visions, miracles, healings, are central. This can lead to movies where events are driven by supernatural intervention rather than grounded character choices or logical plot development. These moments might feel powerful to believers but confusing or unbelievable to others, making the film less accessible or credible. 4, us versus them framing. Evangelicalism, especially in its more politicized American forms, sometimes creates culture war narratives where Christians are the persecuted heroes and secular society is the villain. This can lead to straw man atheist characters, simplistic courtroom showdowns like we see in God's Not Dead, and over-dramatized persecution stories. These tropes rarely resonate outside the target audience and can alienate viewers who might otherwise engage with more nuanced portrayals of faith. 5. Lack of artistic mentorship. Because of their separation from mainstream arts institutions, evangelical charismatic communities often lack mentorship in high-level screenwriting, directing, or cinematography. Churches may fund films, but with spiritual goals, not artistic excellence in mind. In short, evangelical charismatic Protestant culture tends to prioritize spiritual impact over artistic integrity. That's not inherently bad. It reflects deep convictions, but it often results in films that preach more than they move. So here are some examples of some Christian movies that have got it wrong. God's Not Dead. It's heavy-handed, unrealistic plot. Atheists are cartoonish villains. Faith is portrayed as intellectually unassailable with no room for complexity or struggle. The film frames a strawman version of secularism and academia, which alienates rather than invites. It doesn't explore doubt or the real tension of faith. It declares victory from the start. 2. Fireproof. It's got weak acting, stiff dialogue, and a preachy tone that often overshadows the genuine emotional core of a struggling marriage. The redemptive arc is undermined by cliché storytelling and lack of emotional depth. It also avoids the complexity of real relationship problems in favor of a one-size-fits-all spiritual solution. 3. Facing the Giants. A simplistic narrative where faith guarantees success, such as winning football games, having babies, etc. It reinforces a prosperity-light gospel. Believe hard enough and God will reward you materially. That's theologically shallow and dramatically unconvincing. 4. Left Behind. Disjointed storytelling, bad acting, and a plot that depends on viewers already believing in a very specific eschatology of pre-tribulation rapture. It's more apocalyptic spectacle than meaningful exploration of faith or human character. It alienates both secular audiences and Christians who interpret Revelation differently. The Remaining. A horror rapture mashup that tries to be both a thriller and a sermon. The genre blending feels confused, and the message overshadows emotional authenticity. It ends up being neither scary nor spiritually compelling. 6. The Encounter. Jesus shows up at a diner and directly tells people how to fix their lives. It's a setup that leaves no room for real human decision-making, struggle, or mystery, just instant answers from a supernatural figure who already knows everything. So what are some common threads in these films, and why do they fail? One-dimensional characters, unrealistic dialogue, preach first, story second approach, and faith as a magic fix, not a lived tension. These films often speak powerfully to their intended audiences, but artistically and dramatically they tend to fall flat when judged by broader cinematic standards. Now here are some Christian-themed or faith-informed movies that tell powerful stories with artistic excellence and emotional depth. These films do it right by letting faith emerge organically through complex characters, morally ambiguous situations, and strong filmmaking. Now I will say I don't agree with theology in all of these movies. I am a Catholic. I don't agree with the evangelical Protestantism nonsense and all that, although some of these on this list are more Catholic. I don't agree with all the theology, but I'm talking about it from a more storytelling standpoint. A Hidden Life. A meditative, visually stunning portrayal of an Austrian farmer and devout Catholic who refused to fight for the Nazis. It explores moral courage, sacrifice, and quiet conviction. The spirituality is subtle but profound. The direction embraces silence, beauty, and inner struggle, far from sermonizing. 2. Silence by Martin Scorsese. Deeply philosophical and emotionally harrowing exploration of faith, doubt, and martyrdom in 17th century Japan. It's got the faith element of wrestling with God's silence and suffering. This is Christianity with teeth, with no easy answers. It's got artistry, gorgeous cinematography, complex moral questions, and outstanding performances. 3. The Chosen. A multi-season series on the life of Jesus focusing on personal, relational storytelling rather than miracles or preaching. It's got the faith element of grounded portrayals of biblical characters as flawed, relatable people. It's devotional without being cloying. It's got the artistry of high production value, strong scripts, and emotionally resonant character arcs. 4. First Reformed by Paul Schrader. A psychologically intense story of a pastor wrestling with despair, environmental collapse, and faith in a broken world. It's got the faith element of complex theology, spiritual crisis, and existential dread. Schrader, a Calvinist race filmmaker, doesn't offer easy comfort. Again, I don't agree with Calvinism. I'm a Catholic, but we're not talking about the theology here. We're talking about it from a storytelling standpoint. Artistry, subtle, slow-burn drama with impeccable acting and deep philosophical weight. 5. Of Gods and Men. Based on the true story of French Trappist monks in Algeria who chose to stay with their Muslim neighbors during civil unrest despite the threat of death. It's got faith elements of radical love, peace, and the cost of discipleship. It's got the artistry of quiet, powerful, human, no over-explaining, just faith lived out through action. 6. The Tree of Life. A poetic, non-linear meditation on grief, beauty, family, and God's presence. It's got faith elements of implicit but pervasive, a cry to God from within the mystery of life and suffering. The artistry of operatic visuals, philosophical ambition, and deep emotional resonance. 7. The Mission. A rich, tragic story of Jesuit missionaries in South America dealing with colonialism, conscience, and resistance. Faith elements of vows, grace, and sacrifice, how faith collides with power and violence. Artistry, a sweeping score, unforgettable cinematography, and moral complexity. 8. Calvary. A darkly ironic yet heartfelt portrait of an Irish priest who receives a death threat in confession. Faith elements of priesthood, forgiveness, and the burden of belief in a cynical world. Artistry, sharp writing, layered characters, and raw emotional payoff. These films succeed not because they're Christian movies, but because they are good movies about Christian themes. They respect the art form, wrestle with deep questions, and allow faith to feel lived, not lectured. Now, we're going to get specifically into Catholic movies and Catholic movies that didn't do it right. While Catholicism has inspired some of cinema's greatest achievements like The Mission, Silence, A Hidden Life, and more, there are definitely bad Catholic movies out there. These tend to fall into similar traps as bad evangelical films, prioritizing message over story, relying on stereotypes, or romanticizing suffering or miracles without artistic discipline. Here are some examples of some bad or at least deeply flawed Catholic movies. Number one is Fatima from 2020. I am a fan of Fatima from 2020. I love that movie, but it is not a great movie. It has issues. It's a reverent but dramatically flat retelling of the Marian apparitions at Fatima in 1917, and it also cuts out a lot of the story of Fatima. It's got overly sentimental and sanitized. The film avoids the political and theological complexity of the event and opts for soft, focused piety. It feels more like religious reenactment than compelling drama. 2. Therese from 2004. A biopic of Saint Therese of Lisieux that lacks energy, depth, or cinematic style. It flattens a rich spiritual life into a lifeless period drama. Dialogue is stilted, acting wooden, and the pacing drags, ironically making a saint known for deep inner passion feel dull. And honestly, that's a problem that I see with Therese in general. A lot of people don't really do research into who Therese really was or what she thought. They kind of just look at this little girl, this little weak girl that became a saint. But Therese was actually very, very faithful, very powerful, very strong. She grew to be very strong, but many Therese stories just skip over that part, even though that is one of the most compelling parts about her. In fact, Mother Natalia, I believe she was on Pints with Aquinas when she was talking about how she originally didn't like Therese at all until she realized who Therese really was. Number 3, There Be Dragons, a fictionalized story interwoven with the life of Saint Jose Maria Escriva, founder of Opus Dei. It's got an unfocused plot, uneven acting, and ham-fisted attempts to turn a nuanced religious figure into a movie hero. It tries to be a war epic, a redemption story, and a saint's life all at once and ends up being none. 4. The Rite, a horror film based on a true story about exorcism starring Anthony Hopkins. While it flirts with real Catholic theology, it leans too heavily into horror cliches, cheap scares, and a generic plot. It doesn't honor either the genre or the church's deeper understanding of evil and deliverance. 5. The Letters, a biopic about Mother Teresa told through the perspective of a Vatican investigator. It's flat and inert. It avoids the darker, more complex parts of her spiritual struggle, which could have made a powerful film, and replaces them with voiceovers and saintly platitudes. So what are the common problems with these films? Sanitized spirituality. They put saints on a pedestal instead of humanizing them, which makes the stories emotionally inaccessible. Underdeveloped scripts. Reverence replaces realism. Dialogue and conflict are downplayed or removed. Over-sentimentality. Emotion is forced rather than earned. Cue swelling music and glowing candles. Production values. Many Catholic films are underfunded and lack seasoned filmmakers, resulting in amateur visuals and editing. We see this a lot with the older ones. It's worth noting that bad Catholic movies usually come from within the devotional community, not secular critiques of Catholicism. Their intention is to inspire, but they end up preaching, sugarcoating, or misrepresenting the faith's depth and struggle. So now we're going to talk about some of the better ones. There's a rich tradition of good Catholic movies, films that reflect Catholic themes like grace, sacrifice, redemption, moral struggle, vocation, mystery, and the presence of God in suffering or silence. These films succeed because they embrace artistic excellence and spiritual depth. Here's a list from obvious masterpieces to lesser-known gems. A Hidden Life. The real story of an Austrian Catholic who refused to fight for the Nazis. A slow, transcendent meditation on conscience, faith, and martyrdom. Vocation, obedience to God over man, the hiddenness of sainthood. It's got a Catholic core. 2. The Mission. Some of these we've already talked about. Jesuit missionaries in 18th century South America caught between colonial violence and gospel conviction. It's got a beautiful score, rich moral tension, real historical and theological weight. It's got Catholic cores of evangelization, martyrdom, just war, and grace versus law. It touches on just war, and that is extremely important because a lot of people don't even know about just war. They don't. 3. Of Gods and Men. Trappist monks in Algeria who chose to stay with their Muslim neighbors during civil war knowing they may be killed. It's contemplative, deeply human, profoundly moving. It's got Catholic cores of community, martyrdom, Christ-like solidarity, and liturgy as sustenance. Wow, I dropped my phone there. It's great. I give up. Okay. Oh, I love it. Number 4, Silence. Jesuit missionaries in Japan during brutal persecution. An unflinching exploration of doubt, betrayal, and hidden grace. It's got apostasy, God's silence, spiritual pride, and redemptive suffering. 5. Calvary. An Irish priest receives a death threat during confession and tries to face it with integrity. It's dark, funny, and tragic, a modern parable of sin and grace. It's got Catholic cores of priesthood, confession, sacrificial love in a cynical world. Diary of a Country Priest. A young, ailing priest in a small French village quietly struggles with spiritual desolation. Sparse, emotionally raw, theologically profound. Redemptive suffering, spiritual dryness, and humility. Andrei Rublev, a Russian icon painter in the 15th century searching for meaning amid violence and doubt. It's iconic, literally, icons, poetic and weighty. It's got a Catholic-compatible core, artist vocation, silence, sacred beauty, and redemptive suffering. Some lesser-known, but really good Catholic films. The Flowers of St. Francis, episodes from the life of St. Francis and his followers. It's charming, reverent, and grounded in simplicity. It's got Catholic cores of poverty, joy, obedience, and the Incarnation. Integrate Silence, a documentary about Carthusian monks living in near total silence. It's hypnotic and contemplative, nearly no dialogue. It's got contemplative prayer, asceticism, and liturgical rhythm. Romero, the life of Archbishop Oscar Romero, who was assassinated in El Salvador for speaking against oppression. Its passionate and timely portrayal of Catholic social teaching in action. Its preferential option for the poor, prophetic courage, and martyrdom. And then, of course, we have The Passion of the Christ. It was controversial, but it's very direct. It pulls no punches. It does not care. It's going to show you what happened. Brutally, gory. It doesn't care. We love Passion of the Christ around here. We like Passion of the Christ around here. And it's deeply rooted in Catholic devotional imagery. We have The Seventh Chamber about St. Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, a Jewish convert martyred at Auschwitz. These films don't flatten faith into cliches or propaganda. They trust that the mystery of grace is best told through honest, beautiful storytelling. Some are explicitly Catholic, others are Catholic in spirit, sacramental, redemptive, and incarnational. So how do Catholic movies fall into the same trap as the bad evangelical movies? When Catholic movies go wrong, they often fall into many of those same traps, despite the theological and cultural differences between evangelicalism and Catholicism. Here's some of the shared pitfalls. 1. Message over story. The film becomes a sermon in disguise. An example. Therese from 2004 reduces a rich inner life into a series of pious moments with no dramatic tension or narrative drive. An evangelical example, God's Not Dead, turns into courtroom apologetics with no real character development. When this happens, viewers feel preached at, not drawn into a human experience. Art becomes propaganda, not exploration. 2. Sanitize saints and suffering. Holy people are portrayed as flawless, emotionless icons. Catholic example would be The Letters about Mother Teresa. It glosses over her deep spiritual darkness and makes her feel robotic. On the evangelical side, they have many movies where Christian protagonists never really doubt or sin meaningfully. Saints become unattainable. Sainthood becomes unattainable, making holiness feel irrelevant rather than inspirational. Number 3, over-sentimentality. Overuse of swelling music, slow motion shots, or teary monologues to force emotion. A Catholic example would be Fatima from 2020. And again, I love Fatima, but it is not a great movie. Fatima from 2020 leans hard into visual and emotional cues instead of letting awe emerge naturally, and that is true. Evangelical example. Fireproof resolves marital crisis with neat prayer montages. It manipulates instead of moves. Viewers recognize emotional shortcuts and disengage. 4. Miracles as plot devices. Supernatural interventions replace meaningful character development. A Catholic example would be many Marian apparition films which show visions without grappling with human doubt, fear, or complexity. An evangelical example would be The Encounter from 2010 that has Jesus literally show up at a diner to solve problems. When this happens, it's bad because miracles should deepen mystery or demand transformation, not act like magic buttons. 5. Flat characters and straw men. Non-believers or antagonists are reduced to cliches. Catholic version. Skeptics are sometimes shown as vaguely evil or emotionally broken, converted through a single event. Evangelical version. Atheists are hostile professors or corrupt politicians with no nuance, i.e. God's not dead. Why it fails. Real stories need real people. Audiences don't believe in caricatures. 6. Low production value and isolated creative ecosystems. Many Catholic and Protestant films are made outside mainstream film culture. This often means less access to skilled writers, directors, and actors, limited budgets, oversight from religious organizations more concerned with safe content than good art. These films don't benefit from the creative friction or artistic standards that shape great cinema. And I'm saying this as someone who just let his phone that he's filming with fall 3 times. So, there's that. Fear of ambiguity. Everything must be clearly resolved, theologically tidy, and morally obvious. A Catholic example. Some saint biopics omit the saint's moral or spiritual struggles to preserve a polished image. Evangelical example. Most conversion movies end with emotional, unambiguous transformations. It fails because real faith involves doubt, mystery, waiting, and failure, all absent in these clean resolutions. Bad Catholic films and bad Protestant films fall apart when they tell instead of show, preach instead of explore, simplify instead of wrestle, and protect faith instead of letting it live in the real world. The irony is that Catholic theology, with its love of mystery, paradox, beauty, and incarnation, has deep cinematic potential. But when that gets reduced to safety, sentimentality, or spiritual public relations, it flattens the gospel into forgettable film. So what do we find in good Catholic writing? Catholic writing at its best is not just about Catholic things. It embodies the Catholic imagination, which sees the world as charged with meaning, beauty, sin, and grace. It is sacramental, incarnational, and deeply human, often wrestling with paradox and mystery rather than resolving them. Here's what it looks like when done well. 1. Sacramental vision. The ordinary is steeped in the sacred. This can mean a glass of water, a child's laugh, or a moment of silence can become a window into eternity. An example would be Flannery O'Connor's grotesque southern landscapes. They aren't distractions from grace. They're where grace erupts. It's not writing that only lives in churches, monasteries, or biblical times. 2. Tension between sin and grace. Catholic writing doesn't flinch from evil. It dives into it to reveal redemption. This means that saints are sinners, and sinners are never beyond saving. There's no cheap grace. Example, The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene. His whiskey priest is cowardly, lustful, and yet a vessel of God's mercy. What it's not. Sanitized characters who find Jesus and never struggle again. 3. The incarnation is anchor. The flesh matters, earth matters, history matters. What this means, bodies, food, sex, birth, death, all these are not beneath holiness but woven into it. Example, J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth is rooted in this incarnational worldview. Evil is real, beauty is sacred, courage matters. What it's not, escapist spirituality or Gnostic denial of the body or the material world. 4. Mystery over certainty. Catholic writing allows space for unanswered questions and divine silence. What this means, God's presence doesn't always arrive with lightning bolts or voiceovers. Sometimes he is absent but not gone. Example, Silence. The movie Silence wrestles with apostasy, suffering, and God's apparent abandonment. What it's not, every plot neatly wrapped up with a clear moral or conversion moment. 5. Redemption through suffering. The cross is not optional. What this means, suffering is not glorified, but it is often the crucible of transformation. Example, A Hidden Life shows a man's lonely stand against evil, sustained not by victory, but by fidelity to conscience. What it's not, victorious Christianity that skips Good Friday to get to Easter. Six, attention to beauty and craft. The truth must be beautiful and the beautiful must be true. What this means, a Catholic writer should strive for literary excellence, not preachy prose, but well-forged language. Example, and I know this isn't necessarily Catholic, but Dante's Divine Comedy is theological, but it's also poetic, political, philosophical, and imaginative. It's not sloppy storytelling excused by good intentions. 7. Community, tradition, and the communion of saints. We are never alone in our stories. What this means, characters wrestle with the church, not just God. Saints, sacraments, and inherited memory matter. Example, Kristin Lavransdatter, set in medieval Norway, shows faith passed through generations, flawed but enduring. What it's not, purely individualist me and Jesus narratives. In short, Catholic writing at its best is messy, not moralistic. It's mystical, not magical. It's beautiful, not preachy. It's tragic, yet hopeful. It's rooted in the real and reaching for the eternal. So I think a lot of what the problems that we see in these mainstream Christian movies that fall flat are Christploitation. It's Christploitation. It's exploiting Christ. It's knowing that the mention of Christ or the mere appearance of Jesus' forgiveness will get 1 million Christians to buy it and watch it, even if it's going to fall flat. It's going to get pretty much a cult following, but it's going to generally fall flat on the evangelization standpoint. Christploitation is a critical term, a blend of Christ plus exploitation, used to describe a subset of bad Christian movies that exploit Jesus or Christian symbols for emotional manipulation, ideological messaging, or profit, rather than genuine artistic or theological exploration. It's similar in concept to exploitation films in general, which use sensational content to hook viewers without real depth or substance. In this case, though, the sensationalism is religious. Break script for a minute. I grew up in an evangelical Protestant household. I was an anti-Catholic for over 30 years. I was raised on these horrible movies, and I hated them my entire time growing up because they always felt empty. They always felt empty. I believed in Jesus, but I didn't believe in what they were portraying it as. Key features of Christploitation. Jesus is a plot device, not a person. Jesus appears not as a character with agency or mystery, but as a magical fixer or spiritual vending machine. He's often used to provide instant solutions or emotional payoffs rather than provoke real transformation. Example, in The Encounter, Jesus literally shows up at a diner and solves everyone's life problems with gentle scolding. Two, emotion over authenticity. Overuse of dramatic music, slow motion, teary-eyed conversions, and near-death experiences to force spiritual reactions. Instead of earning emotion through character and story, the film pushes emotional buttons tied to religious trauma or nostalgia. It's like a preacher yelling, "Jesus loves you," over dramatic music while someone plays a montage of puppies and sunsets. It feels like it should mean something, but it's hollow. 3. Miraculous convenience. Problems disappear once the characters find faith or pray hard enough. Suffering is rarely complex or unresolved. It's tidily erased once the correct spiritual lesson is learned. Example, in Facing the Giants, a losing football team starts winning, a couple gets pregnant, and financial problems vanish after they rededicate their lives to God. 4. Strawman villains and culture war rhetoric. Non-believers, atheists, professors, liberals, Muslims, etc., are often caricatured as hostile, arrogant, or immoral, and are easily defeated by righteous Christians. The world is framed as good versus evil, Christians persecuted by a hostile secular world. Example, God's Not Dead. We always keep going back to that. God's Not Dead features an atheist philosophy professor whose arguments are absurd and whose downfall is designed to affirm the believer's worldview. 5. The gospel as a slogan. The story is structured to deliver a Christian marketing message, often reduced to a sinner's prayer at the climax. Faith becomes transactional. Say the prayer, avoid hell, and everything works out. This cheapens the mystery of salvation, turning it into a plot resolution rather than a lifelong journey, which is another problem I have with these evangelical movies, because as Catholics, we know that is not how salvation works. And we know that the whole once saved, always saved is nonsense. We know this, but that's another story for another time. Christploitation fails because art becomes a sales pitch, faith becomes formulaic, and Jesus becomes a mascot, not a mystery. It's not that these movies are evil, they're often well-intentioned, but they treat Jesus like a tool for inspiration or conversion rather than inviting us into the full complexity of living a life shaped by the gospel. So what's the alternative? Films that let grace emerge organically through conflict, love, loss, and endurance. Movies where Jesus isn't shown so much as felt in the silence, the struggle, the sacrifice. Think A Hidden Life of Gods and Men, or even Silence, films that respect the story and trust the audience to encounter Christ on deeper, quieter terms. So what it really comes down to is a lot of these movies are falling into the same trap that even... Wow, this phone. But do you like my Father Mike and Paul Kim shirt? Yeah. But a lot of these movies are falling into the same trap that evangelical Protestantism, charismatic Protestantism falls into in general, where they focus so much on getting preachy that they're not hitting the mark. And That's not even how Jesus evangelized. Jesus himself saw people as real people. Even in his parables, fictional characters, in his parables, he still portrayed them like they were realistic people. We're supposed to meet people where they're at and understand them and understand their struggles and see what they're going through and face it together, not just do this cheap, sanitized, watered down form of lowest common denominator Christianity. But we see that in these movies all the time, even some of the Catholic ones. That's why these movies tend to be awful, even if you're a Christian.